Goblin launch detected.
Hey gang, and welcome back. Just so you know, you can use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, one word, at FlipsideGaming.com to get 10% off orders $10 or more. You can also use the promo code at Original Magic Art on everything except for paintings. And finally, you can use the code at mtg.multizone.ca to get 10% off of your orders of singles. Using the code will help you save some money and help out the channel at the same time. Today is another terrific showing from Trevor in New Jersey. And we've got Matt playing his Tails deck, keeping Rogue's Passage, Terrain Generator, 2 Snow-Covered Plains, Swiftfoot Boots, and Solemn Simulacrum. Trevor is playing Nikki B, keeping a Sunken Hollow, a Steam Augury, a Murderous Cut, a Lightning Greaves, a Sulphur Falls, and a Blood Crypt. Mike has shelved his shirtless and sexy Saboteurs, and instead is playing his Ghave deck, keeping Safi Eriksdottir, Vindictive Vampire, Reveillark, Plains, Llanowar Wastes, Tainted Wood, and Temple Garden. Harry has joined us for this one as well, playing his Garna deck, and keeps Cavern of Souls, Fulminator Mage, Mountain, Swamp, and Rakdos Signet, Carnarium, and Cluestone. Harry wins the die roll and starts us off. Harry plays a Swamp, passing. Matt plays a Snow-Covered Plains, and passes. Trevor plays a tap Blood Crypt. Mike plays a tap Temple Garden. Harry plays a Mountain, and casts his Rakdos Signet. Matt plays a Terrain Generator, and casts Swiftfoot Boots. Trevor plays a Sulphur Falls, before casting a Talisman of Creativity. Mike is the only one without a turn 2 play, and he plays a Swamp before passing. Harry's going to keep on theme and go for a flavor win this game, tapping out for a Rakdos Cluestone before playing a tapped Rakdos Carnarium and bouncing a land back to his hand. Matt plays a Reliquary Tower and passes. Trevor ponders in his main phase, looking at his top 3. He rearranges them as his choosing and draws one of them. He then drops a tap Sunken Hollow and taps out to cast a Lightning Greaves. Mike plays a Tainted Wood and pays 3 for a Chromatic Lantern. Harry replays his Mountain and taps all of his mana for an Extractor Demon. At the end of turn, Matt activates his Terrain Generator to put out Snow-Covered Plains. Matt plays a Rogue's Passage for his land for turn and casts Solemn Simulacrum, because who says you can't ramp in white? He finds a Snow-Covered Plains and passes. Trevor plays a Temple of Deceit, which comes in tapped and lets him scry. He keeps it there, passing. Mike has a Llanowar Waste come in as his land for turn, and pays 4 for a Vindictive Vampire. He passes, threatening a 1-mana white removal spell. Harry plays Dragonskull Summit, and pays 4 for Gonti. Gonti comes in and targets Trevor. With the ability on the stack though, Trevor responds when he gains priority with a Steam Augury to save the cards on top of his library. He makes his 2 piles, and Mike picks the pile. We then see the Gonti resolve, with Harry taking one of the top 4. He did let the table know that he could have taken Necropotence, but is more satisfied with Trevor putting it on the bottom, and Harry then casts a Fulminator Mage before passing. Matt draws and plays a Snow-Covered Plains. He pays 5 for a Batterskull, gaining a Germ token as it enters. Matt then moves the boots onto the Germ, making it the best dressed creature at the table, and heads to combat. He hits Trevor for 4 and gains 4. Trevor plays a Ghost Quarter for turn that Mike gave him from the piles, and he plays his own Chromatic Lantern. Serum Visions then has him draw a card and scries him 2 cards deep. He puts 1 on top and 1 on the bottom, and he passes. Mike plays a Reflecting Pool and brings out Ghave, who comes in with 5 +1/+1 counters. Harry plays a Caverns of Souls and names Human. We then see a Priest of the Forgotten Realms come in, and with nothing else, he passes. Matt casts Land Tax in his main phase, which would be even better if he wasn't currently the player with the most lands. We then see his commander, 8.5 Tails, and he passes turn. Trevor isn't having any of this, and pays 5 in his main phase for Crux of Fate, having the spell blow up all non-dragons. With the spell in the stack, Harry sacrifices his Fulminator Mage to blow up Trevor's Ghost Quarter, and responding to the target, Trevor sacrifices the Ghost Quarter to destroy Matt's Rogue's Passage. With the Fulminator Mage dying, Harry gets an Extractor Demon trigger, and he mills himself for 2. He then flashes in Garna, and responding to Garna's Enter the Battlefield trigger, Harry taps the priest to activate her ability, and he sacrifices Ghave and Garna. This forces Harry's opponents to sacrifice a creature and each lose 2 life, while Harry gains 2 black mana and draws a card. Mike makes a token with Ghave, which he sacrifices, and the Vindictive Vampire deals 1 to each of Mike's opponents and gains him 1 life. Harry also has to resolve his 2 mill triggers from the Extractor Demon for the cost of activating his priest, and mills himself for 4. Harry then mills himself for the creatures that were sacrificed as well. The board wipe then resolves, and Harry has more triggers. He realizes he should have resolved the Garna Enter the Battlefield trigger before the board wipe, and fixes it by returning the correct creatures and not those he milled after the board wipe. Trevor then passes. Mike plays a Plains and drops a Grave Pact in his main phase. He then passes. Harry casts Trevor's face down card, Silumgar Monument, and taps it for 1 black for his Carrion Feeder. We then see a Priest of Urbras come in, giving Harry 3 red mana as it enters. He uses the red and some lands to drop a Sifter of Skulls before passing to Matt. Matt plays an Extraplanar Lens in his main phase, exiling one of his snow-covered plains. He pays 4 to recast Tails, and another 4 for Hammer of Nazan. He has it attached to Tails, and Matt passes. Trevor draws, and passes. Mike drops a Swamp for turn, and brings back out Ghave in his main phase. Harry recasts his Fulminator Mage, and Trevor isn't super keen on that resolving. He uses a Dissipate to exile it, and stop Harry from recurring it over and over again with Garna. We then see the Cavern being tapped to make his next spell uncounterable when we see Zhao Dun hitting the stack. As it's still Harry's pre-combat main phase, Harry sacrifices Zhao to return Tortured Existence to his hand, which he then casts. He also remembers to get an Eldrazi Scion token from the Sifter trigger when Zhao Dun died. Matt uses his land tax trigger to find some snow-covered plains and puts them to hand. He then draws for turn and plays one of them. Matt then moves the boots onto Tails, and then the Batterskull, which is as Harry puts it.
Oh, biscuits.
Tails then goes at Harry, who blocks with the Scion and sacrifices it to the feeder before damage to deny Matt the life. Matt then passes, and at the end of turn, Trevor uses Chaos Warp, targeting the Tortured Existence. Harry responds to the spell by activating the enchantment, discarding a Stinkweed Imp to return Zhao Dun to his hand. Harry then shuffles the enchantment in and reveals an Invocation Attrition. Trevor draws and passes. At the end of turn, Mike makes a Saproling with Ghave. Mike casts a main phase Emrakul Evangel and passes. Harry recasts Ghave in his main phase and targets Trevor again as it resolves. We actually get to see what he takes this time, and Cyclonic Rift is probably the right pick. Moving to combat, Harry swings the team at Trevor. Before leaving the Declare Attacker's step, Trevor flashes in a Torrential Gearhulk. He targets the Steam Augury again, and with the ability on the stack, when Harry gets priority, he uses Attrition to take out the Gearhulk by sacrificing his priest. He also gets a Scion. They then resolve the Steam Augury, with Trevor revealing his 5 and making the piles, and this time he has Matt pick the pile, with Matt giving him the Solemn Simulacrum and lands. The creatures then connect, and Trevor takes 6. At the end of turn, Matt uses his Terrain Generator to put in another snow-covered plains. Matt plays a Core Haven and activates his Tails ability to give itself protection from white. He then makes Ghave white and the Scion white, and heads at Harry again for 6. Harry takes the hit, and Matt gains 6 before he passes. Trevor plays his Solemn Simulacrum in the main phase and goes to find a basic. He plays a land for turn, and moves his boots onto the Solemn before dropping a Dragon Tempest. He then goes to find the land. At the end of turn, Mike makes another Saproling with Ghave. Mike casts an Aura Shard to an audible groan of the table. He decides to pass, and at the end of turn, Harry sacrifices Ghave to the feeder, gaining another Scion token, and then sacrifices the Scions and taps some mana to recast Garna. With her ability on the stack, Harry sacrifices her to the feeder and bins her, gaining yet another Scion token. He then resolves the Garna's trigger, getting back the 2 creatures to his hand. Harry dredges his Stinkweed Imp instead of drawing, and he then casts Zhao Dun again, using his Caverns to make it uncounterable. He sacrifices him again before combat to return Dictate of Erebos to his hand, and gains a Scion token from the Sifter. With the targets chosen, Matt uses Swords to Plowshares to try and exile the Carrion Feeder, but Harry sacrifices it to itself and gains another Scion. The spell then fizzles and the abilities resolve, and Harry then sacrifices the Scions and taps some lands to cast Garna again. With her trigger again on the stack, he once more sacrifices her to something, and this time is to attrition. He targets Mike's Evangel and gains another Scion token. Mike responds once he gains priority, and taps the Evangel and sacrifices some Saprolings to make some bigger Eldrazi tokens. Mike first gains 3 Grave Pact triggers, which wipes away most of the board, and Harry floats the mana with the Scions, while Trevor draws a card with his Solemn Simulacrum dying. They then resolve the Garna trigger, a bit out of order unfortunately, with Harry returning his creatures to hand. Mike then gets his Eldrazi tokens, and then resolves his Aura Shards triggers, blowing up Attrition, the Hammer, and Trevor's Greaves. Harry then heads to his end of turn, and has to discard down to 7. Matt plays a Snow-Covered Plains, and recasts Batterskull, giving it the boots once more. He heads at Harry again, dealing 4 and gaining 4, and then he passes. Trevor draws for turn, and has to tap out almost entirely for Nikki B in his main phase. His commander enters, triggering the Dragon Tempest, and Trevor pings Harry for 1 with Nicol Bolas, forcing Harry to discard his hand. Heading to combat, Trevor declares Nicol Bolas is headed at Mike, and before leaving the attacker's step, Mike makes a Sapling token with Ghave, and then sacrifices it to Ghave. This gives Mike an Aura Shards trigger, which he uses to take out the Dragon Tempest, as well as a Grave Pact trigger, which has Trevor saying goodbye to Nikki B. And Matt says goodbye to his Germ. With nothing else, Trevor passes. Mike draws and heads to combat, swinging Ghave and the Eldrazi tokens at Matt. Matt uses the Core Haven to fog the Ghave damage, and then takes 9. Moving to his second main phase, Mike doesn't want to overcommit and passes. Harry draws and casts the Demonic Tutor he just drew. While Harry is searching, Matt puts out another Snow-Covered Plains with his Terrain Generator. Harry settles on a card and passes to Matt. At the end of turn, Matt once more bounces his Batterskull back to his hand. Matt casts Rune of Protection White in his main phase, and brings out the Batterskull once more, slipping the boots onto it once it resolves. Responding to the equip trigger, Mike makes a token and sacrifices it with Ghave. He targets the boots with the Shards trigger, which get blown up, and Matt then passes. At the end of turn, Trevor asks how much Ghave would cost Mike now if he'd be removed, and Mike says 9. Trevor then pays 1 black and delves away enough cards for a Murderous Cut, targeting Ghave. Mike responds to this by making and sacrificing 3 Sapling tokens one at a time, and targeting Trevor's 2 mana rocks, and Harry's Signet with the final one. With those triggers on the stack, Harry gets to respond and overloads Trevor's Stolen Cyclonic Rift. Unfortunately for Mike, in his haste to deal with Trevor's stuff, he layered his triggers and abilities before letting any resolve, which means the Rift resolves before anything gets blown up, and Trevor gets to keep his rocks while Harry falls on the grenade for the table. Trevor plays a tap Watering Fumarole as his land for turn, and he recasts his Talisman before passing to Mike. Mike draws and casts his Chromatic Lantern, and then brings out Grave Pact. Trevor, having left up his mana for a reason, counters it by flashing in the Snapcaster Mage, and flashing back Dissipate to exile the enchantment. Mike then heads to his combat step, and discards down to 7. Harry dredges a Stinkweed Imp again, dumping from his library into his graveyard. He recasts the Tortured Existence, which he tutored for, and discards his Imp to return a creature card to his hand. It's the Carrion Feeder, which Harry casts. We then see Garna returning, who isn't long for the world, and Harry sacrifices her to the feeder while the ability's on the stack. Harry then resolves her ability, and returns Garna, the Stinkweed Imp, and a Grey Merchant of Asphodel. He then passes turn. Matt recasts his Lens, exiling another Snow-Covered Plains as it enters. He pays 6 for Tails, which is basically 3 lands, and asks to look at Harry's yard. We then see a Pearl Medallion, before recasting the land tax and Rune of Protection. At the end of turn, Trevor loses 2 from casting a Vampiric Tutor. Trevor casts his Chromatic Lantern and brings out the new Nicol Bolas, the Ravager. His opponents each discard a card, and Trevor then heads to combat, hitting Mike for 2 with the Snapcaster Mage to send a message. Mike plays a Bojuka Bog for turn, exiling Trevor's yard, before bringing back out Ghave. Harry plays a Rakdos locket, which is so powerful it shakes the very foundation of Trevor's apartment. He then brings out Gary the Grey Merchant, whose devotion is currently 4 as it resolves. This drains Harry's opponents for 4 while gaining him 12. With nothing else, he passes. Matt asks to see Mike's yard this time, and after checking, casts Open the Vaults, which has everyone bring back their enchantments and artifacts, which at this point is mostly just Matt. Matt has the hammer and boots reattached to Tails, and then goes to find a basic with Solemn. He then brings back the Batterskull for what feels like the umpteenth time, which also attaches to Tails. Matt then swings Tails at Mike, who makes 2 more sapling tokens with Ghave. Before moving to blockers, Matt then makes them white and gives Tails protection from white, with Mike taking 9 commander damage and Matt gaining 9 life. At the end of turn, Mike uses the Path to Exile on Nicol Bolas, the Ravager. Trevor allows it and goes to find a land that he actually kinda desperately needs. Trevor overloads a Vandal Blast in his main phase, and Harry and Matt aren't super happy, but at least Matt gets to draw a card as his Solemn dies. Mike plays a Cave of Koilos, and recasts the Aura Shards before passing to Harry. Harry draws and passes, and at the end of turn, Matt cycles a land to draw a card. Matt plays a Sensei's Divining Top in his main phase, and activates it to look at the top 3. With nothing else, he passes, and at the end of turn, Trevor uses a Fact or Fiction. He picks Matt as his opponent and reveals his top 5. Matt makes the piles, with Trevor taking the pile with Niv Mizzet and the Mystic Confluence, putting the rest to the yard. Trevor plays a Cavern of Souls and names dragons for it, before bringing out Niv Mizzet and passing turn. Mike brings out a Recruiter of the Guard in his main phase, and the table's concerned. Trevor, of the mindset that he'd rather counter the combo piece than the tutor, lets it resolve. Mike goes to find a card, while Matt gives his top protection from white to save it from Mike's Aura Shard trigger that he got with the Recruiter entering and had put onto the top. Mike then finds and reveals a Viscera Seer, putting it to hand. He then casts it, and with it entering, he blows up Trevor's lantern. Mike then passes, and at the end of turn, Harry flashes in Garna. With her trigger on the stack, he sacrifices the Merchant and Garna and then returns them to hand. Harry plays a Priest of Gix in his main phase, gaining 3 black mana. He uses the floating mana and 2 lands to recast Gary, who, with it on the stack, prompts Mike to make another sapling token with Ghave. It comes in and blows up Harry's tortured existence. Harry's Grey Merchant is still chilling on the stack when Trevor counters it with a Mystic Confluence, forcing Harry to pay 3 he doesn't have, and Trevor chooses to draw a card and bounces Snapcaster Mage back to his hand. Because he drew a card, Trevor now has a Niv Mizzet trigger, which he uses to deal 1 to the Seer. With nothing else, Harry passes. Matt plays a Snow-Covered Plains, and activates his top to look at the top 3. He then activates it again to draw a card. We see Matt's Blackblade Reforged then hit the field, and without his hammer, Matt sadly has to pay to equip it. Tails is now a 16/16, which is enough to kill Harry, but he's not much of a threat right now. Matt then plays Aura of Silence, which is a decent counter to the Aura Shards, and moving to combat, Matt swings Tails at Trevor. Matt decides to not make Niv a white permanent though, and Trevor just blocks the dragon. Trevor draws and recasts his Snapcaster Mage. He gives his Mystic Confluence flashback, and recasts it in his main phase. He targets Tails and the Snapcaster Mage to bounce back to their owner's hands, and chooses to draw 1 card. Matt makes the Confluence a white spell, and gives Tails protection from white. The rest of the spell then resolves what it can. Trevor then plays a Watery Grave, losing 2 to it, and then casts Dragonlord Silumgar, but Matt makes it a white spell as well to prevent it from stealing Tails. Mike draws and brings out Safi Eriksdottir. While she's still on the stack, Matt uses his Aura of Silence to take out the Aura Shards. Mike lets this go too without too much concern, and evokes a Reviarch once all that's resolved. He sacrifices Safi to have the Reviarch return on death in response to the evoke trigger, and brings back the Seer and Safi as it dies. The Reviarch then returns thanks to Safi's trigger. Mike can then loop it again, and sacrificing the Reviarch to the Seer, this time brings back his Vindictive Vampire and Safi, and is able to close out the game with a cycle combo. Game review time. I think Mike really only had one chance to go for his combo, and that was the last turn where he won. All of his opponents were tapped out, and knowing Trevor, he probably had some way to disrupt it in his hand. I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, he just comboed off and won the game, but there's a little bit more to that. It required Mike to basically be aware of his opponents and the board states and make sure that he didn't do it too early and run it into removal, and not to do it too late and basically just lose. I think almost every deck in this game did a pretty decent showing for itself, with Garna being a huge recursion engine and Harry was able to get so many of his creatures back consistently. I think had he had a bit more mana, he could have had a devastating few late turns by casting the Grey Merchant, sacrificing it, recurring it, and recasting it. Matt was also doing a great job of bouncing back his Batterskull and having enough mana to recast it and then swing out with it. I do understand the reason that he didn't want to make the Niv Mizzet into pro-white, and it was because he didn't have any of his doublers out, and a lot of his mana was already tapped at that point, which made his tails a bit more vulnerable than normal. I think of all the decks, unfortunately Trevor's deck was probably the least well positioned. He missed a lot of land drops, didn't have very much mana generation from rocks, and it seemed like most of the time he was on the defensive and never really established his board. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.